Honorable members, when the business of the House suspended on the 13th of September, we were at item 5, the laying of documents, and also on that occasion, I had laid a number of documents that were presented by the Auditor General, and at that time, copies were not available for all members. We are now in possession of all those copies, and so that members are able to get copies of those documents, particularly members of the committee will receive copies of those documents at this time. Statements and, yes, laying of documents.
Speaker, I rise to lay on the table of the House a copy of the Currency Notes and Coins Amendment Order 2017.
Order that the document be brought up.
Yeah.
Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the International Tax Corporation Amendment to Schedule Japan Order 2017.
Order that the document be brought up. Okay. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to lay on the table of the House the Bahamas Registered Stock Act, Chapter 362, the Bahamas Registered Stock Direction 2017, Bahamas Registered Stock 2020, 2022, 2024, 2027, and 2037, dated 30 June 2017.
Order that the documents be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. For further laying of documents.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the Bahamas Registered Stock Act, Chapter 362, the Bahamas Registered Stock Directions 2017, Bahamas Registered Stock 2020, 2022, 24, 27, and 37, dated 15 September 2017.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the annual report 2016 for the Securities Commission of the Bahamas.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the annual report for the Financial Intelligence Unit 2016.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the annual report and statement of accounts 2016 for the Central Bank of the Bahamas.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
The Industries Encouragement approved product, Great Cliff Cigar Company, Order 2017.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
I beg leave to lay on the table the Industries Encouragement Act, approved manufacturer, Great Cliff Cigar Limited, Order 2017.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table the Industries Encouragement approved product, Carilux Bahamas Limited, Order 2017.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table the Industries Encouragement Improved Manufacture, Carilux Bahamas, Order 2017.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table the Industries Encouragement approved product, Crystal Clear H2O Company Limited, Order 2017.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Speaker, I beg leave to lie on the table the Industries Encouragement Improved Manufacturer, Crystal Clear H2O Company Limited, Order 2017.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table the Price Control General Amendment Order, the Price Control General Amendment Order Number 3 Regulations 2017.
Order that the document be brought up.
I'm sorry, on behalf of Minister Redwood Wells. Minister responsible.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document will lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I rise to lay on the table the Food Safety and Quality Act 2016, appointed day notice 2017, on behalf of the Minister responsible for Agriculture.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to lay on the table, beg leave to lay on the table, the Plant Protection Act 2016, appointed day notice 2017, again on behalf of the Minister responsible for Agriculture.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table the Animal Health Protection Act 2016, appointed day notice 2017, again on behalf of the Minister responsible for Agriculture.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Speaker, I rise to lay on the beg leave to lay on the table the Bahamas Agricultural Health and Food Safety Authority Act 2017, appointed day notice, on behalf of the Minister responsible.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
I rise and beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the Payment Instrument Oversight Regulation 2017.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents. No further laying of documents. Statements and communications by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Mount Moriah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning to you, sir. Honorable ministers, Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a communication on crime. Before I do so, I acknowledge and thank the wonderful people of Mount Moriah who have reposed their trust in me for the next 5 years as their Member of Parliament. For this, I am extremely honored and stand ready to represent them as their servant in this great and historic place. With God's help, we will work in a spirit of empowerment to bring about the progressive changes and improvements that communities require. Mr. Speaker, since assuming office, like many other concerned Bahamians, I too have had enough of the unacceptable level of crime that currently exists in our nation. I listened intently to the criticisms, and some have gone as far as to say that the minister is to be blamed for the high level of violent crime. Mr. Speaker, on May 10th, 2017, the day our government won the election, the crime challenges that plagued our nation before that day did not mysteriously disappear. Nobody pressed a reset or reboot button, which caused all of the long-standing crime problems and its root causes to magically disappear. Mr. Speaker, there is no quick fix to such a complex and ever-evolving problem. The issues we face today are a manifestation of years of inattention, abdication of responsibility, and I dare say, in some instances, neglect. Anybody who believes that this very complex predicament can be rectified in just 4 months after coming to office has no concept of the underlying factors that impact crime and the lack of serious appreciation of a long-term sustainable platform which will be required to address it. Mr. Speaker, our government is determined to bring an end to the incessant number of murders and violent crimes which have captured national attention for almost a decade. I have always recognized that the task ahead would be fraught with challenges, which is one of the reasons I decided to take this journey on. If you are looking for me to bend and break, please forgive me. I do apologize. I have committed myself to my country, the great people of our nation, my party, and my leader. I intend to be a part of the solution, not the problem. Mr. Speaker, I liken this experience to living in a house whose roof have been torn off by a hurricane. With nowhere else to go, you are left with no other option but to repair the damage one step at a time until the roof is made whole again. We have already begun work toward repairing our roof. We will not catch all of the leaks in one day, or even 4 months. However, Mr. Speaker, our government remains resolute and confident in our plan. Before I continue, Mr. Speaker, as I always do at every opportunity, I wish again to publicly commend the efforts of the members of all our law enforcement agencies, the police, defense force, Department of Corrections, Customs and Immigration Services, the brave men and women who daily expose themselves to danger or risk their lives to secure and protect our nation. A grateful nation thanks you for your continued service. In the aftermath of Hurricane Irma, you responded admirably in protecting our islands, our people, and maintaining the peace during this critical period. For this, we are grateful. Our government is committed to improving your welfare, the least we can do. I also want to say that our thoughts and prayers go out to those who have been impacted by crime over the years and violence. Mr. Speaker, according to figures by the Royal Bahamas Police Force, between 2012 and 2016, a total of 46,292 serious crimes were committed in the Bahamas. The murder count has exceeded 100 for each of the last 5 years. In 2015, we witnessed the highest annual figure in our nation's history, a total of 146. And although there were decreases in certain areas, the murder count continued to increase, and the levels of violent crimes remain at levels far too high for such a small nation as ours. The fear of crime was and remains at an all-time high, and this has the potential to stifle productivity and impacts the quality of life of far too many Bahamians, residents, and visitors. Mr. Speaker, I wish to share the latest crime figures reported by the police thus far for September 2017, compared to the same period in 2016. For crimes against the person, murders are up by 41%, with 103 incidents. And for those who may be interested, prior to May 10th, we had 58 reported murders. Post May 10th, we're currently at 45. Attempted murders is down by 20%, with 12 incidents. Manslaughter, 1 incident reported. No manslaughter incident occurred up to the same period in 2016. Rape is down by 15% with 45 incidents. Attempted rape is up by 88% with 15 incidents. Unlawful sexual intercourse is down by 25% with 91 incidents. Armed robberies is down by 35% with 380 incidents. Robbery is down by 44% with 72 incidents. And attempted robbery is up by 17% with 14 incidents. For crimes against the property, burglary down by 25% with 80 incidents. Housebreaking down by 8% with 612 incidents. Shop breaking down by 4% with 467 incidents. Stealing down by 13% with 670 incidents. Stealing from vehicles down by 24%, with 717 incidents, and stolen vehicles down by 33%, with 335 incidents. Total crime figures to date compared to the same period last year are down by 19%. And that would be the overall crime figures for this year compared to the same period last year. The category of crime which seems to be the national barometer on crime is murder. While material possession in most cases can be replaced, there is no substitute for the loss of a father, a mother, brother, sister, or other loved one. And so, for a few minutes, Mr. Speaker, I wish to speak about this issue. Permit me to share with you a breakdown of murder motives during the period 2010 to 2015 from a recent study. Mr. Speaker, out of the 719 murders during that 6-year study period, nearly 50% involved conflicts and retaliation killings. More specifically, these murders involve ongoing feud between gang members. Robbery-related murders accounted for 14% of the incidents. A total of 10% stemmed from domestic violence, which involved violence between intimate partners, siblings, parent-child. A total of 9% were drug-related. When we examined motive thus far for 2017, we found similar trends. These motives suggest that we must focus more of our attention to young people who gravitate toward gangs, violence in the home, and drugs. The study also details the profile of murder victims and suspects, Mr. Speaker. A total of 89% of murder victims were males. 64% were between the ages of 18 and 35. 60% had prior criminal records. 31% were involved in gangs, and 18% were on bail at the time of their death. A total of 97% of murder suspects were males. 82% were between the ages of 18 and 35. The study also found a similar profile among those who were charged with the offense of murder. A total of 97% of suspects were males. 82% were between the ages of 18 and 35. 58% had prior criminal records. 42% were involved in gangs, and 39% were on bail at the time of their death. It is also important to note that earlier studies on local murders found that 64% of murder victims and 71% of murder suspects were unemployed. A recent University of the Bahamas study on inmates at the Bahamas Department of Corrections found that 54% of sentenced inmates dropped out of school, and 48% were expelled from school. Mr. Speaker, when we consider the evidence, it stands to reason, therefore, that if we are going to have any measure of success and positively impact crime, our programs must be designed to aggressively address root causes and risk factors. These factors include education, educational attainment, poverty, poor parenting, and mental disorders, which are all having a profound impact on the socialization of our children. This results in many of them turning to a life of crime. Mr. Speaker, firearms play a significant role in our crime challenges. At most, murders were committed with the use of illegal firearms. For example, during 2010 to 2015, Nearly 80% of murders was a result of gunshot wounds. Over 2,566 firearms were taken off of our streets during that period. Moreover, 234 firearms and 7,820 rounds of ammunition have already been seized thus far for 2017. These figures give us a snapshot of just how hard our law enforcement agencies have been performing in removing firearms off our streets. Mr. Speaker, for years we have been spending millions of dollars on anti-crime programs and the acquisition of modern crime fighting tools and equipment. But based on our most recent review, the results have shown us that we have done a less than adequate job of oversight and maintenance. Ongoing assessments continue to point to this fact, that although many of these efforts were well-intentioned, they were not having the intended impact on crime that had been anticipated. This outcome can be attributed to poor execution, a lack of legislative or regulatory support, and a poor oversight at the policy level. To explain my point, Mr. Speaker, I want to use the electronic monitoring program as an example. In jurisdictions across the United States, Canada, Mexico, this technology is used to serve as an alternative to incarcerations for first-time nonviolent offenders. However, Mr. Speaker, we're probably one of the only countries that places ankle bracelets on persons charged with the offense of murder and other serious crimes, and do not ensure that stricter guidelines are stipulated. The EM bracelets did little to deter suspects from either engaging in criminal activity or becoming victims to crime themselves. Just a week ago, for example, during Hurricane Irma, police arrested a male who was being electronically monitored for armed robbery charges. After searching the suspect, a gun was found concealed in the suspect's monitoring device. Police records also indicate that since November of 2016, 13 persons have been murdered while being monitored, and one suspect was charged with murder while being monitored. These facts then beg the question as to how effective is the program and what benefits are truly being accrued if the EMS is not having the impact anticipated of stopping or deterring those being monitored from being involved in further criminal activities, either as suspects or actual victims. I will detail how our government intends to fix this and other underperforming anti-crime programs and initiatives later in this communication. Mr. Speaker, now that we are nearing the end of our review of the past crime strategies and the delivery models for execution of these strategies, our government and my ministry have begun the initial stages of executing our plan. Our government remains committed to that which we articulated in our manifesto: conducting manpower audits, zero-tolerance approach to crime, increased police visibility, targeting hotspots, focusing on prolific offenders, establishing a guns and gangs unit, establishing an anti-corruption unit, establishment of a national intelligence agency, the enforcement of martial laws, the establishment of a sex offenders register. Mr. Speaker, the success of any crime plan must include, as one of its principal drivers, the men and women on the front lines, members of our law enforcement agencies. The overly centralized approach was negatively impacting the delivery of critical policing services at policing divisional levels. As a result, communities are being negatively impacted. We fully understand that in certain situations, it may be appropriate to pull large groups of officers together to carry out large selective police operations. However, These operations should not weaken police divisions to the point where normal delivery of local policing services is disrupted. We should never find ourselves in a situation again where only 2 police officers are on duty during a given shift at a police station and expect them to provide quality services to respective communities. Mr. Speaker, the police command is well on the way to addressing these problems. As soon as our establishment review is completed, as promised by our government, we will introduce a permanent fix to this problem. Mr. Speaker, detective units will be reestablished within the local police units again, divisions again, to ensure that communities are provided with swifter response times to serious offenses. Members of this honorable House may recall that in 1999, under an F&M government, a strategic review of the Royal Bahamas Police Force was carried out by an independent firm. And one of the recommendations was to create detective units at policing divisions throughout the country. Mr. Speaker, as a serving police officer at the time, I supported that recommendation then, and I do so now. I believe that a decentralized approach to tackling crime issues at the divisional level, with the appropriate levels of accountability in place, will assist both the police and the community in addressing crime and other quality of life issues. Mr. Speaker, over the years, successive governments have continued recruitment activities to address the manpower needs of the police force. Despite these efforts, however, it appears that sufficient officers are still not available during key times to adequately provide the police presence necessary to prevent and detect crime on a sustained basis. Mr. Speaker, the time has come for us to determine once and for all what human resources will be required to effectively and adequately provide policing services to communities throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. There is an urgent need for us to determine whether there is an actual shortage of manpower or whether the issue is one of deployment. To objectively determine the correct establishment of the police force, we have commenced a comprehensive manpower audit. This audit will verify what human resources are required to effectively operate police stations and other policing divisions throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, to effectively carry out their duties, every member of the Royal Bahamas Police Force must be provided with the requisite training and retraining. There is a clear need for a refocused effort on training at every level and in every law enforcement agency in our country. Training has been inconsistent and lacked a true focus. We will ensure that our law enforcement officers at all levels are properly trained and aligned with international law enforcement standards. Mr. Speaker, our government is committed to ensuring that our officers are well prepared to more than effectively carry out the duties required of them. Our government understands the importance of the development of officers and good policing. No longer will a pass be given to someone based on relationships. Mr. Speaker, my ministry has already laid the groundwork for the establishment of a multi-agency operation across our law enforcement departments to deal with challenges we face with guns, gangs, drugs, and human trafficking. Given the composition of our nation, 700 islands spread over 100,000 square miles of sea, the challenges faced with finding those weapons can be daunting. However, this multi-agency task force will focus much of their attention on those individuals and organizations responsible for the trafficking of firearms into our country and disrupting their method of operations wherever they may exist. This will be intelligence-led. Mr. Speaker, earlier I indicated that for the past 6 years, almost 3,000 illegal firearms have been confiscated in the Bahamas. Thus far, for 2017, a total of 234 firearms and 7,820 rounds of ammunition have been seized. The Bahamas does not produce firearms, and intelligence suggests that they are coming into our country through various means, including courier services, pleasure crafts, airports, and seaports. Mr. Speaker, enforcement at these locations is being stepped up, and those engaged in the trafficking of firearms, along with those who facilitate them, including public officials, are forewarned. Out of the 157 firearms that were traced by police thus far for the year, 124, or 79% of them, originated out of the state of Florida. The remainder were traced to 20 other states across the United States. We will intensify our efforts by building our intelligence capacity and capability and aggressively pursuing those responsible on a 24/7 basis on every street corner of this country. We will continue to work with our U.S. government partners and improve the synergy between local law enforcement stakeholders. We will expose the trafficking methods and bring those organizations to justice who continue to smuggle firearms into our country. Mr. Speaker, illegal weapons have also become the symbol and tool for the gangs in our country. Given the growing concerns around the presence of local gangs and consistent with our government's policy, the Royal Bahamas Police Force has advised that a team of officers trained in gang activity will form a gang and guns unit. That unit was established just yesterday. The acting commissioner launched these units just yesterday. The unit will identify, target, and arrest when warranted, charge gang members with a view to dismantling their operations and organizations. The unit will pursue criminal gangs through proactive, focused, and sustained coordinated investigations to obtain successful prosecutions. The Guns and Gangs unit will also offer education, prevention activities to at-risk youth to dissuade them from becoming involved in gang activities. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, the Internal Security Division of the police force, once a critical arm of the police force in the crime fight, had been watered down to almost nothing. The police have assured me of their intentions to rebuild this important unit to serve as a rapid response unit. The objective of this unit will be to go into hotspot areas of New Providence, Grand Bahama, and wherever else warranted, and root out the criminal element wherever they may exist. The acting commissioner is in the process of launching that unit as well. Mr. Speaker, I have spoken to the executive command of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, and I have requested that performance targets be included into the Commissioner's annual policing plan for the purpose of measuring the yearly performance of the police against their previous record. The Bahamian people would like to know by what percentage the police would hope to reduce certain categories of offenses in a given year. Mr. Speaker, our government will create a multi-agency and a multidisciplinary crime-fighting initiative to address our crime challenges and bring a greater focus to the causes or risk causes versus the symptoms. Our government has established an interministerial group made up of ministers of national security, education, youth, sports, and culture, labor, social services, public works, and education. Our government is also expected to introduce shortly an holistic social initiative, national in scope, free from silos, that cut across ministerial boundaries and seek to address those risk factors that are leading our young people to crime. We are expanding this multidisciplinary approach to members of civil society to lend their expertise and experience to the fight at the national level. I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Sandra Dane Patterson of the Crisis Center, who shared details about the many programs they have in addressing intimate partner violence and child abuse by encouraging victims to stand up and not just to stand by. Since we know that the number of domestic-related murders was significant, we have decided to partner with Dr. Patterson and her team and others in a meaningful and tangible way to lower the number of domestic-related homicides in our country. Mr. Speaker, this is an example of what our government is referring to when we say that we will be focusing more on risk factors associated with crime. Mr. Speaker, I also had a series of meetings with Dr. David Allen and his team of experts of the People Helping People program. We discussed one of his explanation on the causes of violence, which he describes as social fragmentation process. This process is manifested through revenge, which result in the disintegration of the family, the development of youth gangs, and subsequently violence. Since nearly 50% of murders involve conflicts and revenge killing, my ministry will partner with Dr. Allen and other similar programs that seek to intervene in the lives of troublesome males at a young age, with a view to preventing them from becoming socially fragmented from society. Mr. Speaker, my ministry also met with researchers at the University of the Bahamas and explores ways in which UB can assist my ministry in finding more evidence-based strategies to combat crime. They also express a willingness to assist us with evaluating anti-crime programs to determine what impact they're having on crime and safety indicators. Mr. Speaker, my ministry is establishing a crime advisory group which will be made up of business community, civil society, the religious community, and other community partners, which will provide input and ideas on crime at a national level. A technical advisory group will also be established. Members of the public will be able to provide advice directly to my ministry on cost-effective and innovative crime-fighting technology. A key focus of our crime plan is providing amendments to existing and new enactments to existing legislation and new enactments to support the delivery of our anti-crime commitments. Our government will be tough on crime, tough on causes of crime, and tough on criminals. We have made it clear that those who commit crimes will be punished for their actions. We will take a zero-tolerance approach to crime, and we mean it. Mr. Speaker, permit me to share with you another sobering example of why the criminals feel so emboldened. Just over a week ago, police officers attempted to stop a suspicious vehicle with 2 male occupants. After a short chase, the car came to a stop and the suspects were searched. One of the males had a .45 pistol in his pants with 10 live rounds of ammunition. When the officers ran a background check on that suspect, he was on bail during the time for 2 counts of murders and 3 counts of attempted murder. He was also being electronically monitored. Mr. Speaker, persons being electronically monitored for violent crimes have become a menace to the police and, by extension, law-abiding citizens. Our government has already begun taking steps to address this serious problem. Mr. Speaker, it cannot be that we should have persons being granted bail and freely roaming our streets while armed, facing multiple murder charges. My ministry has been in active discussions with the Office of the Attorney General to explore avenues to ensure that persons charged with multiple similar offenses committed over time remain incarcerated to the time of their trial without bail. Mr. Speaker, the introduction of illegal firearms in our communities have forever transformed the crime landscape in our nation. The rock and bottle generation are long gone. Our researchers conducted an analysis of punishment for firearms and ammunition convictions, possession convictions in 2016. Out of the 98 convictions, the majority, 60%, involved a sentence of 2 years in jail or less, some of which were as low as 6 months in jail. Fines were imposed in 17% of the conviction, one of which was as low as $1,000. There were also 2 cases where the suspects were sentenced to probation or community service. Those are simply the facts. We are seeking ways in which the Firearm Act and other associated laws can be strengthened to stiffen the penalty for those found in possession of weapons, particularly high-powered assault weapons. Mr. Speaker, we must not allow those persons engaging in this heinous trade to adopt the mindset that rewards outweighs consequences. Our small nation cannot afford it. Mr. Speaker, we know that fostering a strong relationship with members of the public will be paramount in ensuring that public safety concerns are adequately addressed, especially at the community level. As a result, we have begun the work for the creation of a National Neighborhood Watch and Community Empowerment Council, which will serve as the nationwide bridge between law enforcement and local communities. This council will facilitate the strengthening of existing and new crime watch groups and other partnerships among the business, civic, and religious communities. The council will commence a host of properly organized crime prevention activities, including citizens on patrol, and video integration centers, which will monitor private CCTV cameras throughout neighborhoods, private homes, and businesses. Mr. Speaker, as stated earlier in my contribution, successive governments have spent an exorbitant sums of the people's money on technology over the years. However, we have not been able to measure the success of the spending on crime. Somewhere along the way, we have lost focus on how useful technology can be to aid in the reduction of crime. As a result, Mr. Speaker, it has become almost impossible to gauge whether Bahamians have been getting value for their hard-earned money. Mr. Speaker, in April 2012, the government of the Bahamas invested $4.6 million to the establishment of a state-of-the-art CCTV monitoring center and installed 243 CCTV cameras, mainly in the downtown area and a few crime hotspot areas in New Providence, Prince George Wharf, Yarawak Port, and other ports of entry. The system that was installed was the latest technology at the time and was phase 1 of the program. The system had the capability to expand and offer more services, including license plate recognition, technology, behavioral analytics, facial recognition, and a host of other crime-fighting features. Additionally, the system had the capacity to tie into private sector networks, thereby enhancing their coverage throughout the island of New Providence. Mr. Speaker, it was intended that in successive years, the network would be expanded with the addition of more cameras and the acquisition of additional features to take advantage of the new technology. By now, had the program progressed as planned, all of the major roads and thoroughfares and many of the communities would have had CCTV cameras. The system, however, was not being properly maintained and could not be expanded due to insufficient bandwidth, which is essential for producing quality images. This impacted nearly 119 of the 243 cameras. Hard drives and servers were not upgraded, and staffing issues at the CCTV center was far from adequate. Again, Mr. Speaker, I made the point earlier. $4.6 million of the people's money was invested in a system, if functioning, could contribute tremendously in the fight against crime. However, due to the priorities and interests, the National CCTV Program, one of the most vital initiatives in the fight against crime, which was started under an F&M government, had been totally neglected. We have already taken steps to ensure that every single camera is fully functional. We are in discussions with BTC to correct the bandwidth issue to the appropriate levels and upgrade the servers and hard drives. Mr. Speaker, the government is firmly of the view that a properly functional electronically monitoring program integrated with the CCTV project and supported by mobile patrols will all enhance our ability to aggressively address crime issues that occur on our streets and in our neighborhoods by targeting prolific offenders and disrupting their criminal activity. As I alluded to earlier, the electronic monitoring system is another technology that we have been spending an exorbitant amount of taxpayers' dollars on, but have not really been getting value for money as a result of confusion and poor execution, and in some cases interference. Let me explain why. We pay millions of dollars annually to monitor suspects. Latest figures show that 268 offenders are being electronically monitored for a number of offenses, including 70 for murders, 18 for attempted murders, 103 for armed robberies, and 59 for firearm offenses. Since November 2016, 13 persons have been murdered while being monitored, and 1 person has been charged with murder while being monitored. We believe that one of the contributing factors is that we are placing these devices on some of the most serious offenders, which was not the original purpose of the program. In addition, exclusionary zones and curfews were not always imposed as conditions of bail. As a result, some of the most dangerous offenders were able to move about the city freely and unrestricted. Our government has had discussion on ways to ensure that the penalties levied against those persons engaged in the trafficking and the possession of firearms are made to account to the fullest for their action, Mr. Speaker. One of the principal problems we found during our review of the EMS system or program was the working relationship between the police and the electronic monitoring provider. We have taken immediate steps to ensure that many of the quirks that currently affect performance of the EMS program are addressed. Mr. Speaker, I have met and discussed those issues with the executive command of the police force as well as the service provider. My ministry has already commenced work on exploring other forms of technology, some of which I mentioned earlier, that can be useful in crime prevention and detection, including gunshot detection, facial recognition, body cameras for police officers, license plate software, and other technology, including the use of drones. We will also be maximizing the use of social media as a means of broadening law enforcement community outreach, as well as to aid in crime prevention, detection of crime, and the apprehension of offenders. Another important step focuses on dismantling the illicit drug trade, which is one of the underlying drivers of crime and violence in our communities. We are fighting the war on drugs from several fronts, including interdiction, shutting down drug houses, prosecuting drug peddlers, drug prevention and treatment. Up to August of this year, authorities have seized 1,385 pounds of cocaine and 11,890.64 pounds of marijuana. A total of 1,100 suspects were arrested, 940 of whom were subsequently charged with drug-related offenses. A key focus in the police approach to policing hotspots is identifying and shutting down these drug houses and arresting community drug dealers. Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt that the presence of these drug houses in our neighborhoods has been the fuel to many of the violent crime problems in our communities. The police have commenced an all-out assault on these locations and will relentlessly pursue those persons for attempting to destroy our communities by selling drugs. No drug house will be spared. Mr. Speaker, just this morning I had the opportunity to speak to the Acting Commissioner of Police, and I intimated to him at the time that I expect that the police will now quadruple their efforts to find every vehicle in the police force, wherever they may be, every police officer who is not currently carrying out the functions of a police officer, and they are to be added to the current force on the streets of New Providence to complement the existing numbers. Our intentions, Mr. Speaker, is to blanket New Providence on a 24/7 basis. Commissioner will be giving me an update on his progress as soon as tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, another very important step of our government's crime focus is the rehabilitation and reintegration of offenders. Noting that current incarceration and recidivism rates are at an unacceptable level, we understand that recently released inmates, who are typically males in the prime of their lives, seem to have very few viable options to be successfully rehabilitated and reintegrated. Our government will be enacting legislation shortly to address the conditional release of offenders into society through a parole and probation system. Emphasis will be placed on first-time nonviolent offenders in the first step. The new process of parole will address rehabilitation, reintegration, reoffending, recidivism, and reduce the costs associated with incarceration. The goals of this initiative will also include assisting ex-offenders, providing supervision and monitoring, and providing support to inmates, enabling them to reintegrate into the community through productive and crime-free lifestyle. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I am happy to say that our government stands ready to deliver on its commitment to the people. Let me assure every Bahamian under the sound of my voice, our government views the crime problem as a very serious threat to our national security and our way of life. We will not allow crime and the fear of crime to remain at unacceptable levels. Our government will not allow at-risk youth to be drawn into a life of crime without having positive alternatives. Our government will not allow criminals to seemingly operate with impunity without the fear of either being caught or punished. Most importantly, Mr. Speaker, our government will not allow persons who have paid for their wrongdoings and have demonstrated through a process of rehabilitation that they are now ready to re-enter society as productive citizens, to return to a life of crime. Our government will not be distracted. While some criticisms may be warranted, there are others who seek to be the voice of negativity in an attempt to seek attention and, in some cases, some level of relevance. This is not constructive. There is much work ahead, Mr. Speaker. I will conserve my time and my energy to doing the people's business. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, given the scarcity of resources, we cannot afford to conduct business as usual. We will maximize the use of our collective law enforcement resources in such a way to yield the highest level of efficiency. We are realigning and refocusing our national security efforts in such a way that the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas can reap the success of good governance through the reduction in violent crime. God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order that the communication be brought up.
What came from the communication, not even on the serious matter of crime. I just want to know whether they're not prepared to do so. That it was controversial in places, you know, but inherently controversial. But if the government is not prepared to respond to the opposition in Parliament on the matter, no problem, Speaker.
Do you have any copies of this yet? Order that the communication do lie on the table. Further statement on communications by ministers. The chair recognizes the member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to give a communication to Parliament on the 2017 IMF Article 4 consultation and Moody's Investor Services Credit Review for the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I have the honor and the privilege to stand in this place on behalf of the wonderful people of East Grand Bahama, who I am honored and privileged to serve. Mr. Speaker, since the last sitting of this Honorable House, and in my capacity as Minister of Finance, I have had the opportunity of presiding over two very important...
Honorable members, the member for East Grand Bahama has the floor.
Thank you.
Continue.
I've had the opportunity of presiding over two very important assessment exercises conducted by international agencies on the fiscal and broader macroeconomic performance of the Bahamian economy. Here I'm referring to the IMF Article 4 surveillance exercise and the Bahamas credit rating review undertaken by Moody's Investor Services. I might add that while both of these exercises are based on the opinion of the analysts, their observations and policy assessments can have important impacts on the domestic policy debate and decision-making processes and influence investor perspectives of the Bahamas. There are common themes about the recent economic performance, prospects, and risks to be found in both assessments, and a preponderance of focus on the fiscal situation and the government's articulated strategy for achieving fiscal consolidation and addressing the inherent risks. Firstly, I wish to update members on the 2017 IMF Article 4 consultation with the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, under Article 4 of the IMF's Articles of Agreement, the IMF holds annual bilateral discussions with member countries, which involve an in-country visit by an IMF team of economists to assess economic and financial developments and discuss the country's economic and financial policies with government, central bank officials, and other key domestic stakeholders, such as representatives of the business and financial communities, the opposition, civil society, trade unions. At the end of this exercise, the IMF staff would prepare an Article 4 staff report to be used as the basis for discussion by the IMF's Executive Board, which represents all of the IMF member countries. Summaries of these discussions and assessments of the country's economic situation and the adequacy of its economic policy measures are subsequently published in press releases and posted on the IMF's website, as are the Article 4 country reports prepared by the IMF staff. The IMF's 2017 Article 4 consultations with the Bahamian authorities took place from July 12th through 26th of 2017. And we are aware that the IMF board discussions was held on September 8th. As is customary, the government had a discussion post-completion of the in-country assessment on the observations made by the IMF and the direction of their policy recommendations. Mr. Speaker, the IMF staff made a number of observations regarding recent macroeconomic developments in the Bahamas. Among these was the estimated contraction in real GDP by some 0.25% in 2016, amid the adverse impact of Hurricane Matthew. But at the same time, the staff acknowledged the improvements in employment conditions arising from various real sector construction-related activities. As expected, there was significant focus on the sharp deterioration in the fiscal position, which is mainly attributed to large increases in the wages bill, post-hurricane cleanup spending, the temporary tax reliefs, and the interruption in revenue intake caused by the hurricanes. On the domestic financial sector, the IMF staff commented favorably on the adequacy of liquidity and capital in the banking system, as well as the recent easing in the banking system's non-performing loan levels. However, they highlighted the continuation of anemic bank lending activity. In their assessment of the economic outlook for the Bahamas, the IMF staff projects real GDP growth to improve to 1.75% in 2017 and further to 2.5% in 2018, before settling at 1.5% over the medium term. The government agrees with the IMF staff assessment that an increase in foreign direct investment should be positive for growth, employment, credit quality conditions in the banking system, and lending activities. Mr. Speaker, like all forecasts, however, there are external and domestic risks to that outlook, and these have also been signaled by the IMF and acknowledged by the government. As a small, open, and dependent economy, the Bahamas is exposed to global developments, especially those in our major trading partners, and not to mention our vulnerabilities to climate-related events like hurricanes, and of course we just had experience. Among the external facing risks identified by the IMF staff that the Bahamas must contend with are a less favorable growth outturn from U.S. economic growth or tourism, the potential high impact of higher U.S. interest rates on foreign investment flows, the occurrence of climate-related disasters, and possible erosion of external competitiveness posed by further appreciation of the US dollar. As expected, the key domestic risk factors cited, and appropriately so, is the failure of the government to implement fiscal consolidation, with its potential adverse implications for investor confidence and foreign investment flows. These are risks any responsible government cannot ignore, and reinforces government's commitment to fiscal consolidation. Through the implementation of sound, concrete policies, we are committed to putting our fiscal house in order and securing a more sustainable path for public debt management. Mr. Speaker, one of the most important segments of the IMF's staff report is the discussion on the country's policy strategies, those national measures and initiatives either being pursued or that should be pursued by a country to address its challenges and forestall future problems. Based on our policy-related discussions with the IMF, I can say that the government is on board with the IMF staff's key policy messages regarding fiscal policy. We have a common understanding of the importance of achieving fiscal consolidation, and the IMF's policy messages are broadly consistent with positions articulated by the government during the recent budget presentation exercise. Mr. Speaker, I have mentioned in this Honorable House on several occasions elements of the government's strategy for fiscal consolidation, and it bears repeating, given its importance and the favorable endorsement given by both the IMF and Moody's. The IMF's view that fiscal consolidation should have a strong bias on reducing recurrent expenditure is not divergent from that of the government. Indeed, the government is well underway in its review of public expenditure, an exercise that is intended to deliver at least a 10% reduction in outlays, while minimizing the possible impact on growth. Here, the focus is on a blend of initiatives such as program rationalization, where the objectives are not aligned with current policy priorities or producing the desired outcomes. Administrative policy adjustments, project deferrals, and improvements in the procurement process. These matters are receiving priority attention by a committee of ministers and other technical teams. From a more medium-term planning perspective, spending control initiatives are to focus on leveraging the use of public-private partnerships. If we are to ensure the long-term sustainability of the public finances and limit our risks, then we must also embark on pension reform and go beyond the central government's operation to encompass the state-owned enterprises, or SOEs, through reform in governance, restructuring, and greater cost recovery targets. Mr. Speaker, it's never an easy exercise to cut budgets and to contain expenditure. There are tough choices that must be faced and unpopular decisions that must be made. But this is the mantle of leadership, and it is a responsibility that this government will not shy away from. Mr. Speaker, the government's commitment to increased accountability and transparency will be supported by the establishment of fiscal responsibility legislation, a decision which has received positive observations from both the IMF and Moody's, who regard it as a welcome change to our fiscal framework. We see this move as key to institutionalizing fiscal discipline and securing the desired improvements in the overall management of the public funds and correction of our fiscal position. We are making notable progress in the introduction of this fiscal responsibility legislation. Already, IMF technical resources are engaged with my ministry on designing the legislation and operational framework for a credible implementation. In this regard, fiscal rules with due consideration of the need for flexibility to shocks, are being explored, which will target the achievement of an annual GFS balanced budget deficit that will allow, inter alia, for a more sustainable debt to GDP ratio, limits on spending for salaries and related benefits, and ceilings on contributions to state-owned enterprises. Our aim is clear, and it is transparent. We wish to ensure that no matter who is in power, that there are clear guidelines and parameters which any administration must follow to ensure fiscal order and discipline, and to avoid the abuse of the public purse that we witnessed prior to May 10th, for nothing more than narrow, self-serving partisan interests. Simultaneously, attention is being given to ensuring that we have in place the supportive public expenditure management framework to allow for credible implementation of fiscal responsibility legislation. A part of this is ensuring that we can produce the more rigorous information required to meet transparency requirements on the medium-term fiscal strategies and outcomes. Here, the ongoing IDB Public Financial Management and Performance Monitoring Reform Project will assist in ensuring the readiness of our national statistics framework to respond to the government's need to plan, budget, and monitor developments in the real sector impacting its activities, improve its systems for public financial management, and achieve much-needed modernization of public procurement processes. Mr. Speaker, we expect that the draft fiscal responsibility legislation will be consulted upon and finalized prior to the next budget year, which is slated for implementation. Mr. Speaker, another important component of the government's strategy for improving the fiscal situation and increasing fiscal space is our sustained focus on revenue administrative reforms. Ongoing revenue mobilization initiatives target improvements in tax compliance, which are essential to protecting the existing yields and also promoting greater tax efficiency and fairness in terms of ensuring that all monies owed are collected and from all persons obligated to pay. In this regard, the specific focus has been on measures to improve the coverage of property tax assessments and to secure proper and timely filing of VAT and business license returns. The importance of delivering successfully on these activities is underscored by the combined 54% of overall revenue collections to be contributed by these revenue lines for 2017 and 18. Mr. Speaker, our initiative does not stop here, but also extends to setting right concerns that are of a more structural nature. We are seeking to make strides in business facilitation, tackling inefficiencies in the energy sector, and advancing growth-promoting initiatives. Here, the recent appointment of a joint private-public sector Ease of Doing Business Committee is tasked with making recommendations on measures to enhance efficiency, accessibility, and cost-effectiveness in the way business is conducted in the Bahamas. In the area of growth initiatives, the government's focus remains on encouraging and attracting strategic investments and supporting private sector developments with a particular emphasis on small business development. Turning to the Moody's review, Mr. Speaker, let me now turn my attention to the recent credit review exercise carried out by Moody's Investor Services, one of two credit rating agencies that provide an opinion on our sovereign bond issuances. Honorable members will recall that shortly after the government's disclosure during the budget communication and debate on the serious deterioration in the state of the fiscal finances, Moody's initiated a review for downgrade of the Bahamas credit on July 6, 2017. After consultations with government and other local public and private officials during July 24th through the 26th, Moody's on August 25th, 2017, confirmed the Bahamas Baa3 rating, which had been in place since August 2016, when the Bahamas sustained a single-notch downgrade in rating. Mr. Speaker, all things considered, this was the outcome we wanted to achieve going into that assessment, and clearly one that attests to the credibility of the government's strategy for locking in the desired levels of fiscal adjustments. Mr. Speaker, indeed, in arriving at its ratings decisions, Moody's highlighted three key drivers. Firstly, the rating agency pointed to the improved prospects for the government achieving debt stabilization through its fiscal consolidation program, which means that Moody's endorses as credible, as desirable, the government's strategy for redressing the fiscal deficit and stabilizing the debt matrix at more sustainable levels. And unlike the past administration, we shall hold true to our commitments. To regain our credibility as a country, it is essential that we do what we say we are going to do. Secondly, Moody's observed that
Honorable member,
there's no point of order in a statement.
this is a communication.
This is
We're
the-
not remember. I'm invoking the chair.
The rules require that communications by ministers are not supposed to be controversial. And this member has made a number of political assertions, and it's really unprecedented in this House of Communications.
It is not at all. It is not at all. Not at all. You would, the member, Mr. Speaker, since she opened that box, the member would remember. Sorry, Angliston, I apologize. Angliston would remember that on any number of occasions, members on that side, when I sat over there, listen to members over here say all manner of political things in respect, in their statements, all the time. And we raise the same objection, Mr. Speaker. So you know,
Honorable members,
Mr. Speaker, there's
with respect to communications, communications are designed to be non-contentious and to be non-provocative. But it is up to the chair to determine whether a member or a minister is in breach of that condition. And so it is not appropriate for any member to rise on a point of order during a communication.
I'll raise it afterwards, sir.
Certainly.
I'll raise it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Secondly, Moody,
Honorable member,
Determine whether a matter is controversial or not.
yes.
In communication. But it is not an absolute right unto the speaker himself. I could raise the matter. I could say to the speaker, will you consider whether or not this is controversial? And then you can determine that. But you might miss the point. You may miss the controversy in the communication. Any one of us will have the right to indicate to you that we think that that statement is controversial, and then you could rule and say, well, it is or it is not, and the member could continue. I think that's the point that's being made.
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Mr. Speaker,
Continue.
thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is interesting, but the shoe is on the other foot in so many ways. You know, you can rewind the tape a couple of months and you'll be seeing the same thing. It's the campaigning in here, the opposition versus the government is interesting. You know, as they say, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Mr. Speaker, secondly, Moody's observed.
Honorable member, please resume your seat. You don't.
I presume, Mr. Speaker, you are the chair, you are the auditor. This is not right, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member,
I heard your speech, Mr. Speaker.
I am fully aware of my role.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we look to see you execute that decision that you've done.
Thank you, honorable member.
Just one, 2 delegates.
I gotta come here with this together.
Honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Secondly, Moody's observed that the Bahamas credit profile was consistent with other Baa3 rated peers, such as St. Martin, Colombia, and Panama. This outcome was supported by upward revisions in the GDP statistics as portended by the Department of Statistics, which is presently concluding its estimates for 2017, using additional data sources which better capture private consumption. The third driver of the ratings cited as important, the third driver of the rating cited as important is the limited liquidity pressures facing the government, despite higher borrowing requirements, which essentially means that the Bahamas has no immediate challenges in meeting its debt servicing commitments. Mr. Speaker, because of their assumptions of perceived implementation risks, Moody's has, however, changed the ratings outlook for the Bahamas from stable to negative. And here the key risks to fiscal consolidation put forward by Moody's were a less than favorable economic growth outcome, climate-related shocks, and the government's ability to realize the cost-cutting and revenue enhancing measures that would derail our budgetary performance goals. Mr. Speaker, the government acknowledges that success of our fiscal consolidation goals rests with successful execution. And while we cannot argue the existence of these potential downside risks, we are prepared to make the necessary adjustments to our budgetary allocations to ensure that our plan for fiscal consolidation are not derailed. We are resolved in our decision to achieve our fiscal goals, to achieve a sustainable reduction in the deficit, and credit positive fiscal initiatives. Mr. Speaker, both the IMF and Moody's have viewed positively and welcomed our plans for fiscal consolidation, which is a key policy objective of the government. And our ongoing initiatives make it quite clear that we have the commitment and willingness to make those difficult decisions to address the challenges facing our economy. For those who say that the reform agenda is ambitious, that is so, but also exactly what is needed to lock in sustainability, long-term growth, and prosperity for the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, in closing, the government remains optimistic about its policy agenda and has clearly set out on the right path towards establishing a track record of policy credibility. With that, Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Order that the communication be brought up. The chair recognizes the member for Angleton.
To reiterate the point that I raised earlier, when ministers give communications in this House, Mr. Speaker, they're not politicians. They're representatives of the people of this country, and they speak in a nonpartisan way in giving communications. It is a principle of parliamentary procedure and speeches that communications are not controversial, Speaker. And the member, this particular member, his communication was vitriolic, politically vitriolic, and accusatory, and it is not in the spirit of communications, Speaker. And I want to raise with you an objection, and I'm inviting you, Speaker, to admonish the House that ministers' communications, the principle you reiterated, that they are to be non-controversial, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable
Thank you,
Member.
Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the member for East Grand Bahama.
Just for the record, I reject that characterization. What I sought to do was to set out some time frames so that that persons listening will have context. And that's all I've done, Mr. Speaker.
Order that the communication do lie on the table. Further statements and communication by ministers. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Carmichael.
Speaker.
Made by the Ministry of Works.
Speaker, thanks to the generosity of the people of Carmichael. I want to make that clear. This is not from the Ministry of Works. The one from the Ministry of Works is coming soon. Speaker, I rise to make 5 communications. The first one, the Speaker, has to do with the West Bay Street and Bay Street flooding on September 12, 2017. Speaker, on 12 September 2017, northern New Providence in general and the city of Nassau in particular experienced a sudden downpour of rain, which led to significant flooding from the Point and West Bay Street to East Bay Street by approach to Paradise Island Bridge. The information obtained from the Met Office is as follows. In the vicinity of lands and surveys, there was 3.2 inches of rain. At Paradise Island, there was 3.8 inches of rain. At the airport, it was 0.04 inches of rain. And at Stapleton Gardens, it was 0.04 inches of rain. The duration was from 1.75 hours to 2 hours. There was flooding in the following areas: West Bay Street by the Point, Bay Street and Victoria Avenue, Bay Street and Coldbrook Lane, Bay Street and Dunmore Lane, Bay Street and DeVoe Avenue, Bay Street and Christie Avenue, Bay Street and Armstrong Street, and at Dowswell Street. The course of the flooding, sir, is as follows. First, the inspection chamber, which is the manhole, what we commonly call a manhole, that's situated on property owned by the Point, has continuously been blocked by the placement of curry over it by the developers. To date, the government has spent some $38,726.86 to clear the laterals without any contribution from the developers. It is critical that this area remains clear, and we anticipate that our corporate partners will work with us. Secondly, from Bay Street and Victoria Avenue to Dowswell Street, the pipes that convey the water from south to the north side of Bay Street are compromised. There are any number of utility infrastructure in those channels blocking them, thus partially restricting the flow, and that leads to a backup in the system. Third, the intensity of the rainfall in the area was 1.8 inches in 1 hour, which just over the figure that the system can handle. The system is designed to handle 0.8 inches of rain per hour. Finally, there's trash that came in, that seeped in, that impeded the flow of water. It should be noted, Mr. Speaker, that Elizabeth Avenue did not experience that level of flooding as the other areas. That was due to works that are done earlier this year by the contractor, retained by the Ministry of Works. In the short term, the medium term, the following work will be required. First, a scope of work will be developed by the Ministry of Works to have all the laterals in the area impacted water jetted once again. Secondly, that coordination with the utility companies, we will install additional laterals across Bay Street where possible. For the long term, sir, the Ministry of Public Works will liaise with the utilities to work out the logistics for the installation of larger pipes, and that may involve the decommissioning of some of the systems. That's my first communication. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Carry on. Order that the communication be brought up. Order that the communication do lie on the table.
Speaker,
further communications.
Speaker, the other 4 communications I have all relate to BPL.
On course.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to apprise this Honorable House of the post-hurricane activities of Bahamas Power and Light in addressing the restoration of power throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. At the outset, sir, I wish to unreservedly commend the staff and leadership of BPL for their very professional and thorough response. Bahamians can indeed be proud of our diligent professionals who spared no effort in doing whatever had to be done to return our country to functional normalcy in the wake of Hurricane Irma. Mr. Speaker, the Hurricane Preparedness Plan for the Bahamas Power and Light Company is based on a series of checklists and action steps. The plan is separated into preparation and response areas and is updated annually to include lessons learned from previous season, new contacts or updated information for the relevant agencies, new critical facilities as provided by the government, essential services organizations and utilities, and any changes to responsibilities assigned to BPL personnel. There are several areas that are covered in the BPL Preparedness Manual. The first one is what is called pre-season preparations, which are action 2 months before a hurricane. That covers all hurricane season. This covers all actions that are needed to ensure that BPL systems are in a state of general readiness for any storm impact. These activities include placing additional focus on tree trimming, and BPL also prearranges contractors, assesses and augments or replaces heavy equipment, assesses poles or critical lines, purchases hurricane stock, maintains BPL standby generators, checks and repairs BPL's buildings, ensures that storm drains wells are functioning, and conducts all other checks that can be done ahead of an actual storm. Second phase, which is phase 1, which operates on 60 hours notice. BPL commences specific preparations for an approaching storm. This includes setting up a command center, updating system diagrams and maps, securing loose materials and equipment at power stations, substations, and job sites, reviewing responsibilities for operators, repair crews, and contractors, ensuring sufficient fuel is available at power stations in the path of the storm, and at BPL's transport service stations for their vehicles, and communicating with key customers and agencies to remind them to test the fuel generators so that they're prepared in the event of power failure. Third, on 24 hours notice, BPL prepares its vehicles, stock out, checks fuel, increases staffing to critical areas, places food and water in manned sites, concludes command center preparations, secures fragile materials and vehicles. The third phase was the hurricane is in progress. On the operations teams in the system control and at the power stations at work, all remaining staff is instructed to be undercover until the all clear is given through the official channels, or they are called out by the system control team under instruction from executive management. Once the storm has passed, that's phase 5, the work to assess the damage to the system and return service to affected communities and customers begins with an initial assessment period where crews are dispatched, inventory of the damage of the network is prepared, and as much of the system that can be restored within the first 24 hours following the passage of the storm is restored. Following the first day, the command center then begins to dispatch work teams to address the problems identified within the initial assessment period until all supplies are restored. Mr. Speaker, I now touch on BPL's response in each of the impacted islands. In New Providence, 5 poles and 8 pole-mounted transformers were replaced following the passage of Hurricane Irma. In addition, there were a number of blown fuses, broken lines, and failed lightning arresters, impacting nearly 60 separate locations throughout the system. All area repairs were completed on September 10th, and all resources were then focused so as to address the individual customer complaints, such as broken service wires that were made following the storm. In Auckland, sir, there were 6 high-voltage poles down that needed replacement, and roughly 40 miles of high-voltage lines and 10 miles of low-voltage lines down in various areas on the northern section of the island. After the storm, staff began to recover the overhead lines from the field in preparation for restringing, and that started on Friday with the arrival of the team and the bucket truck and digger from Nassau. Salina Point had 1 mile of HV lines down, Repairs were done there on September 14th, and supply is restored to eight customers whose homes could receive supply, as well as the BTC plant and the Water and Sewage Corporation reverse osmosis plant at 4:15 p.m. All repairs to the network in Acklands will be completed by September 23rd of this year. Andros. Operations reported down lines, broken conductors, 3 impacts affecting the network in North and Central Andros. Work was slowed in Central Andros due to roadway concerns into Cargo Creek. 3 high-voltage poles, 7 low-voltage poles, and a stay anchor were reported broken in South Andros. There were also a number of broken down lines in this part of the island. All repairs in Andros were to have been completed on September 13th. Bimini. The operations in Bimini reported 3 poles down in Bailey Town, 1 pole down and a second one leaning in Alice Town, and 2 poles down in South Bimini. There were also a number of down lines in all 3 areas. Access to South Bimini slowed the restoration process, as there was no ferry service or private boats available for a number of days. Further, the pole repairs needed to be completed in North Bimini before the pole setting equipment could be transferred to South Bimini by barge. All supply to Bimini is expected to have been restored as of Monday. Crooked Island. There were 10 spans of HV lines down and 1 pole that was leaning in Crooked Island. Once the pole was straightened and the lines put back up, supply was restored to all customers at 5:30 p.m. on September 9th. Eleuthera. The Eleuthera storm-related damage included 2 poles which were burnt due to failed insulators following the hurricane. The operations also replaced 2 transformers and repaired a number of down lines and customer service wires that were broken or disconnected as a result of high winds. Exuma. Only 1 down pole was reported from the Exuma operations. This pole was located near Tar Bay. There was, however, a number of down high voltage and low voltage lines, 29 spans altogether throughout the islands, and 2 transformers which required replacement. While there were no issues reported on Farmers Key or Black Point, there were several high voltage and low voltage spans down on Staniel Key that needed to be repaired before supply could be restored. All area complaints in Exuma were addressed on September 11, 2017. In Agua, there were 17 downed high voltage poles reported in Agua, along with 43 affected spans of high voltage and low voltage conductors. 2 transformers also needed to be replaced in Agua as a result of Hurricane Irma. It is expected that all supplies on the island will be restored by September 22nd of this year. Long Island. There were no poles down on the main line, but 2 high voltage poles on the waterfront supplying 2 customers at Garlet Key. There were numerous lines off the insulators on the main road and a few spans of broken lines on 3 separate single-phase tee-offs. The entire island, excluding a few isolated customers, were restored at 10 p.m. on September 9, 2017. Long Key. Restoration work was done on Long Key on September 14th. Repairs had to be made to lines on 15 of the low-voltage poles, and then supply was restored at 5:30 p.m. on the 14th. Mayaguana. There were 20 spans of high-voltage lines down on the island and 10 spans of low-voltage lines. Staff flew in from Long Island on September 12th and began restoration work. Supply was restored to 90% of the customers by the 15th. There were 10 customers left who can receive a supply and still off and being worked on, and 10 customers whose buildings require work by a private electrician. All supplies in Mayaguana, excluding the homes that require private repairs, have now been restored. Ragged Island. Significant damage to the distribution system was reported in Ragged Island. BPL continues to coordinate with NEMA and the Royal Bahamas Defense Force on the way forward for Ragged Island. The Defense Force, Ministry of Works, and other agencies will commence work in Ragged Island later this week, deliver equipment, clear debris, and conduct cleaning and elimination of waste. The Defense Force will also construct temporary housing to be used by themselves and other agencies, including BPL, during the restoration. Once initial preparations are completed, BPL will send the necessary teams and vehicles and equipment and materials to the island in order to commence the reconstruction of the network. There's presently no estimate as to when repairs will be completed on the network. Rumkey, there was 1 low voltage line down and 1 high voltage cable that shorted. These were fixed and supplies restored at 7 p.m. on September 8th. Mr. Speaker, once again I commend the staff of BPL. They did amazing work. I thank them on behalf of the Bahamian people for their diligence and dedication, and I look forward to their continued commitment to excellence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order that the communication be brought up. Order that the communication do lie on the table. Further communication.
Speaker, the Bahamas Power and Light Business Plan was prepared by Power Secure and has been topical for some time. That document contains operational recommendations and performance improvement approach, is dated October 23, 2015, and is marked, quote, confidential material, do not distribute, unquote, on the cover and on each page. The government of the Bahamas, through BPL, invested $901,500 in the preparation of this document, and accordingly it is only fair that it is released to the Bahamian people. The plan outlines current and anticipated challenges, as well as costs, and includes a performance summary. The challenges that are identified as contributing to poor performance at BPL include, and I list them 1 to 7. 1, assets in disrepair. 2, costly operations. 3, lagging performance relative to utilities of similar size in other countries. 4, disparate and disjointed system design. 5, power outages leading to disrupted service. 6, poor labor productivity. And 7, low customer satisfaction. A number of strategies are recommended in the business plan to improve reliability and affordability. One of these recommended strategies, which will concern honorable members, is the issue of staffing. The plan operated on the assumption that BPL, quote, has a staffing level that appears to be about 30% high compared to utilities of similar size and makeup, unquote. Integral to the business plan, which the former administration agreed with, was a decision that a reduction of staff by approximately 30% would result in savings of $13 million annually. The plan refers to the proposed reduction of staff at BPL as, and I quote, a business necessity, and envisioned the separation of 233 BPL staff members through a redundancy process in August or September 2017, together with a possible reduction of an additional 64 staff members in September 2018. The business plan and the plan to separate 2,033 staff members at BPL has remained a secret of the former administration until today. Mr. Speaker, the People's Government has made no commitment to redundancy separation plan. Power Secure business plan is being carefully reviewed for its viability in the Bahamian economy. Decisions will be taken in due course in the best interest of the Bahamian people. Speaker, next month will make 2 years since this business plan was prepared. 2 years is too long. The People's Government promised that we would table this business plan for all to see. We have no secrets from the Bahamian people. We are here to live up to our promise, and I'm honored, sir, to have the privilege to table this document today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order that the communication be brought up.
And the document and the business plan table.
Oh.
Sorry?
Some of your other colleagues from Nassau didn't quite make it. Were not that.
Mr. Speaker, we have copies for every member here.
Yes.
And so each member can get a copy of it. Speaker's office.
Only one needs it. Only the
Order that the document and business plan do lie on the table.
Speaker, The fourth communication relates to the management services agreement between the Bahamas Power and Light Company and Power Secure, Inc. Mr. Speaker, in 2013, the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas issued a request for proposals for potential investment and management services relating to the reform of the energy sector in the Bahamas. And pursuant thereto, on April 30, 2015, selected Power Secure, Inc. as the preferred provider. On 8 February 2016, the Bahamas Power and Light Company Limited, BPL, a subsidiary of the Bahamas Electricity Corporation, BEC, entered into a management services agreement, which I will refer to as the MSA, with Power Secure, Inc. Mr. Speaker, the express goal of the MSA was, and I quote, to have a financially strong utility company with modern electric infrastructure, inclusive of renewable energy, that enhances electric generation, capacity, reduce electricity costs to the people and businesses of the Bahamas, and ensuring that electricity supply is safely, reliably, and affordably transported to homes, communities, and businesses on a sustainable and environmentally responsible basis. As the service provider, Power Secure, Inc. was to be given full management and operational control of BPL, including responsibility for all electric generation, transmission, distribution, procurement, and load servicing. Mr. Speaker, at the outset, I wish to advise honorable members that nothing that I say is intended to be criticism of Power Secure, Inc. They sought to work with BPL and did so in accordance with certain norms that they are accustomed to. Sir, pursuant to the MSA, Power Secure, Inc. was to be paid an additional base management fee of $2 million per year. The MSA also provided for the payment to Power Secure of an annual performance compensation fee, which could reach a maximum of 150% of the base management fee, which equates to an additional $3 million US. It is my duty to report that the fees payable thereunder have all been paid to Power Secure to date, for a total of $7,994,753.42 as of 25th July 2017. As of that date, $2,666,666.71 had been paid to Power Secure in management fees. $901,500 had been paid in relation to the business plan. $1,200,000 had been paid as the performance bonus. $1,200,000 performance. $2,035,078.80 had been paid in relation to the Harbor Island project. $1,191,507.91 had been paid in relation to other services inclusive of Hurricane Matthew. Mr. Speaker, the MSA also limited the liability of Power Secure in several respects. First, liability was limited for the performance or non-performance of the services that it had contracted to accomplish. I quote, to an amount equal to 1.5 times the total fees, inclusive of performance compensation and exclusive of cost reimbursements paid to Power Secure for the prior 12 months. Secondly, sir, under the MSA, Power Secure, and I quote, shall not have any liability for any reason for the past, present, or future environmental health of the Bahamas, including but not limited to any environmental risks, issues concerned, compliance or lack thereof, or liabilities that arise prior to or on after the date of the MSA, whether pending or threatened, known or unknown, fixed or contingent or otherwise. End of quote. The MSA did state, however, that Power Secure was to be fully responsible for all of its obligations thereunder, including those related to environmental matters. Mr. Speaker, I wish to draw the attention of honorable members to the existence of a confidentiality clause in the MSA. Mr. Speaker, the people's government is one of transparency, not confidentiality. And so, sir, I will be tabling the MSA today. Mr. Speaker, an interesting provision in the MSA provided that Power Secure was to be reimbursed, I quote, for all wages, salaries, bonuses, and incentive compensation benefits, pensions and other post-employment benefits, travel and business expenses, executive recruiting fees, and other labor and labor costs described in its business plan and reasonably incurred by the service provider in connection with the employment of the executive management. The problem, sir, is that the former administration did not put any limits or caps on the salaries that we had to reimburse to BPL. So BPL ended up having to reimburse Power Secure $76,626 for executive recruiting fees, since these persons that they sent to the Bahamas were not necessarily the employees. And, as honorable members will see in a few minutes, BPL has to reimburse huge cumbersome salaries to executives that Power Secure ostensibly sought out and brought to the Bahamas. These persons were paid salaries that may have been the norm in their commercial environment, but certainly not in line with local standards for financial remuneration. The following three executive salaries: $874,059.95 had been paid in executive management salaries, $329,925.31 had been paid for housing and travel for executive managers. Mr. Speaker, these two sums take the total sum paid to Power Secure as of 25th July 2017 to $9,198,738.68. In relation to the last two items, executive salaries, housing, and travel, I'm obliged to advise that as a result of the decisions that were made by the former administration, the CEO of BPL was paid: 1, a salary of $25,000 per month, housing benefits of $6,000 per month, which was down from initial $8,719 per month initially, other monthly benefits of $3,833.33. Under the MSA, the former administration kept confidential for so long, these monthly costs of $34,833.33 had to be reimbursed by BPL, which means that the Bahamian people paid for it, as well as $27,322.46 in travel costs and $23,637.55 in relocation costs for the CEO. For quite some time, we paid travel costs for a CEO who lived in the Bahamas from Monday to Friday, but spent our weekends elsewhere. Likewise, Mr. Speaker, the Executive Vice President of Generation Operation of BPL was paid: 1, a monthly salary of $23,750, 2, housing benefits of $6,000 per month, 3, other monthly benefits of $3,833.33. As with the CEO, sir, the confidential MSA that the former administration signed and touted provided that this monthly total income of $33,583.33 was to be reimbursed by BPL. Final executive post is Vice President of Transmission and Distribution Operations, which earned the office holder a monthly salary of $18,750, housing benefits of $6,000 per month, and other monthly benefits of $1,333.33. Under the MSA that members opposite kept confidential, this total monthly package of $26,083.33 must be reimbursed by BPL. Mr. Speaker, to put these salaries that the former administration agreed to reimburse to executives elected by Power Secure in perspective, it must be appreciated that a member of Parliament is paid less in 1 year than any of the two top executives of BPL make in 1 month. And that the highest salary paid to any Bahamian executive at BPL, highest salary paid to any Bahamian executive of BPL is $10,600 per month. This is indeed a wonderful example of what members opposite meant when they spoke of putting Bahamians first. Mr. Speaker, on August 17th, Mr. Speaker, if the honourable member wants me to withdraw putting vehemence first, I will withdraw that.
Yeah.
If she wants me to withdraw it, I will withdraw it. No. Mr. Speaker, on 17 August 2017,
That's a fact. You said put vehemence first.
Mr. Speaker, on 17 August 2017, Speaker, on 17 August 2017, the Board of BPL wrote to Power and Secure to itemize certain alleged breaches of the MSA. In accordance therewith, Power Secure had 30 days to respond thereto. Their options were to cure the alleged breaches or to take issue with them. If they failed to cure the alleged breaches without reasonable excuse, the MSA would be terminated. On 18 September 2017, Power Secure, through its local attorneys, took issue with the alleged breaches and itemized certain alleged breaches by the Board of BPL, both current and former. They have, in their words, however, accepted the repudiation of the MSA. The MSA is therefore terminated. Power Secure has agreed to leave their personnel in place until as late as 31st December 2017 to facilitate an orderly transition. I wish to personally thank Power Secure Inc. for their contribution to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas during their tenure here. We anticipate moving forward under new and vibrant Bahamian leadership. It is my honor, sir, to table this MSA entered into by the government of the Bahamas. History will record, Mr. Speaker, that the people's government of transparency and accountability brought this document here at the very first opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order that the document be brought up.
Mr. Speaker, we wish to table the MSA, and we have copies for every member.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Sorry? Yeah, ready. No, one more. Speaker, I have one final communication.
Continue, Honorable Member.
Thank you.
Order that the documents do lie on the table.
Speaker, on behalf of the people of Carmichael, I wish to make a communication on concerning the Ernst & Young report on Bahamas and Power and Light Company. Speaker, as a result of concerns raised in relation to fraudulent checks paid to fictitious vendors prior to the general elections, the Board of Directors of Bahamas Power and Light commissioned the accounting firm of Ernst & Young to perform a forensic audit investigation. In this respect, sir, we are indebted to former BPL board members Nathaniel Benaby, Donna Smith, and Pat Hermans, who spearheaded this probe and who instructed Ernst & Young to conduct the investigation in the widest possible terms. This trio of board members worked closely with me, and I am grateful for their counsel. Speaker, the investigation identified 41 fraudulent checks to 13 fictitious vendors, totaling $1,886,525, and 3 fraudulent checks to legitimate vendors, totaling $126,779. Speaker, the draft report, dated 15th of August 2017, details the process followed and the results of the investigation, which identified, and I quote, numerous irregularities in the manner in which contracts were awarded by BEC since 2012. Since the police are still reviewing the report, sir, I am not at liberty to table it today. Accordingly, I shall refrain from touching on any of the matters outlined in the report in relation to employees of BPL. However, I do wish to point out a number of concerns that are highlighted in the report and which raise serious questions that BPL must confront as we seek to move forward. Excuse me. First, Mr. Speaker, the report identified numerous instances where the tender process was not followed. Many contracts were awarded in excess of $100,000 for which no formal tender had been performed. In other instances, there was no evidence of any procurement analysis or of other quotations being obtained. There were also instances where contracts were awarded to vendors who had not been selected in the tendering process, thereby rejecting the companies that had actually submitted better bids. And in one egregious case, a company that did not even bid was awarded a contract over the company that had followed the process, and to whom the Tenders Committee had approved the award of a contract. Some examples of these irregularities that have been identified in the report are as follows, and these are from the report, Mr. Speaker. ShoreTech CCTV and Surveillance was awarded a contract for $157,750. The contract was never put to tender, and BC had to eventually take legal action against the company when it failed to complete the project. Atkins Security was awarded a contract for $870,684 with ATCUN Security, which was never put to tender. And since 2012, BPL has spent $685,257 with this company. As a result of its contractual relationship with this company, the monthly cost to BEC BPL for security services jumped from $72,280 per month to $94,419 a month, an increase of almost $22,000 per month. 3. Roe Creek Company Limited was awarded a contract of $114,036 to provide furniture. ROWCREEK, I'm sorry, CREEK. Again, there was no evidence of any procurement analysis being done or of any other quotations being obtained. 4. BC spent $4,592,041 with Penta Industrial Services, but there's no indication that there was a competitive process of obtaining alternative quotes or competing bids. The report indicates that this company is owned by Arrington Minky Isaacs. 5. $2,600,000. $626,001 was spent with Bahamas Courier and Logistics since 2012. What is odd about this, Mr. Speaker, is that the Tenders Committee met on March 12, 2012. On May 4, 2012, the Tenders Committee advised the General Manager of BEC in writing that they approved the award of the brokerage contract to Pindus Custom Brokerage. The company that had the best bid, however, the company that had the best bid, Pindus. However, excuse me, sir. However, on 17 July 2012, Bahamas Courier and Logistics, a company that we are all familiar with as a result of the emails between the former Minister of Education and Bahama, wrote to the Executive Chairman of BEC. This was more than 2 months after the recommendation had been made in favor of Pindus. Yet on 15 September 2015, Bahamas Courier and Logistics was awarded the contract, despite the fact that they had never participated in the tender process.
Damn.
The final one I mentioned today, sir. In two instances, J.S. Johnson was the winning contractor in the bidding process for insurance coverage. However, both contracts were subsequently issued to Sunshine Insurance. The report advises Sunshine Insurance. Yeah, I'm sorry. The report advises that altogether, in this period, BPL has spent some The report advises that altogether, BPL has spent some $14,183,159 with Sunshine Insurance during the period. Speaker, if I can repeat that.
Yes, yes.
In 2 instances, J.S. Johnson was the winning contractor in the bidding process for insurance coverage. However, both contracts were subsequently issued to Sunshine Insurance. The report advises that altogether in that period, BPL has spent some $14,183,159 with Sunshine Insurance during the period under investigation. Mr. Speaker, the report identifies other examples of similar irregularities. When we table the report in this place, all of those issues will be made available for the Bahamian public to see. In the interim, sir, and in the long time, BPL will have to institute better controls so as to ensure that the business of the company is conducted in a more ethical, transparent, and accountable manner. Mr. Speaker, the report identified a number of other concerns with the manner in which BPL has violated business norms. I shall touch on a few here. 1, contracts were approved for entities that were owned by former BEC board members. This is troubling, and all of us ought to be concerned.
You come out your BlackBerry, you hit it.
Contracts were approved.
You can't have them for me. I thought leave your BlackBerry on
This is my day. You can't love the Prime Minister more than me.
There's enough better way to do it I got road.
Speaker, contracts were approved for entities that were owned by former BEC board members. This is troubling, and all of us ought to be concerned. 2, the report identifies many instances of lack of vendor due diligence. For example, out of a random group of 35 vendors selected for testing, 19 fell short of meeting basic due diligence standards. There was no due diligence documentation to identify the ownership of the companies that had gotten contracts, or to confirm that they had valid business licenses or tax registration. 3, the chairman of the corporation was permitted to be involved in operational procurement activity. 4, there was no clarity as to who had the authority to create vendor profiles, and accordingly, a range of staff members in various departments could do so. This opened the company to opportunities for fraudulent conduct. 5, in several cases, there was no supporting documentation for payments, too many missing checks and supporting documents, as well as instances of payments being processed without an invoice. Non-existent vendors, and numerous other findings of procedural irregularities that could lead to fraud. Mr. Speaker, the government of the Bahamas is deeply concerned about these irregularities. We are committed to stamping out fraud at BPL. To this end, Ernst & Young is being instructed to pursue further investigations. The current BPL board, headed by accountant Darnell Osborne, and including businessman and engineer Patrick Rollins, accountant Nicola Thompson, attorney Ferron Bethel, and engineer Whitney Hasty, have shown that they are more than up to the task. I thank them for their service to date on behalf of the Bahamian people. We deserve and we shall get answers, and we intend to get our money back. Every single penny of it. Mr. Speaker, I shall table the Ernst & Young report as soon as I am able to do so without interfering with the police investigations. Mr. Speaker, that concludes my contributions today.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order that the document be brought up.
If anyone wants to borrow Carmichael's podium, the people of Carmichael have consented to me lending them to any of them.
Order that the document do lie on the table. Further statements and communications by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for South Beach.
I was advised, Mr. Speaker, that I may use Carmichael's. Never mind, Mr. Speaker. Well, I am grateful to my honorable mentor and senior. Mr. Speaker, and honorable members of this assembly, good morning. I am grateful to the fine people of South Beach for the confidence they have reposed in me, and I'm privileged to serve these excellent sons and daughters of this wonderful Bahama land in this honorable place. Mr. Speaker, I also rise to give thanks to Almighty for His grace and mercy shown to our people in this Commonwealth of the Bahamas during the passage of Hurricane Irma, which unleashed winds of up to 150 miles an hour, even more, across our nation 2 weeks ago. I wish to give thanks to Almighty for the fact that no lives were lost directly from the storm, and while we did not experience human loss, I wish to note, Mr. Speaker, that the Duncantown community of Ragged Island and the Salina Point community of Acklands suffered significant damage. Only the spirit and the resilience of its people remained intact and committed to rebuilding and restoration. And as the Bible would have predicted that we will see strange things, multiple tornadoes in Grand Bahama were indeed strange. Despite her wrath, Mr. Speaker, and while Irma did not make widows or orphans or mourners of us, as she did in other Caribbean islands and in some places in the United States, only our divine favor, the wisdom of a united and professional and bipartisan team, brought us through the storm. And even now, Mr. Speaker, as I prepare to give a report on the impact of Hurricane Irma on the educational plant and the effect it has had on the opening and the operations of schools throughout our country, we watch Hurricane Maria with a cautious eye. And we ask for that same grace that was shown to us through Hurricane Irma and past hurricanes. Our prayers today go for the people of Dominica, Guadeloupe, who have already experienced devastation from Maria, and for Puerto Rico, that now lies in the path of the storm, and as we were advised by news media reports, have already been so affected. Once again, Mr. Speaker, as I stand on my feet here today, our southern islands and the Turks and Caicos Islands are under watch as another powerful storm approaches. And I'm certain that all Bahamians will heed the Prime Minister's call to be prepared and not to waste energy complaining. The government will do whatever is necessary within reason to protect our people wherever and whenever the need arises. Mr. Speaker and honorable members, I was privileged to travel with the Prime Minister, my parliamentary colleagues and others, and other government officials who visited the impacted family islands. I may say to you, sir, and I report most humbly to this honorable assembly, that it was an humbling experience, and one that inspired me to do all that I possibly can to assist in returning to normalcy the lives of the people and the communities uprooted by Hurricane Irma. Mr. Speaker, one of the important signs of hope in any community is the reopening of schools, seeing the faces of children carefree and eager to learn. And as Minister of Education, sir, it was important for me to see firsthand and examine the state of our schools in the wake of Hurricane Irma. And therefore, sir, it is with great gratitude that I report on the state of the schools of the islands impacted by Hurricane Irma. I wish to start, Mr. Speaker, with Grand Bahama, where the schools there sustained no major structural damage. Utilities were disrupted, but have now been turned on again in most school sites, and schools there reopened last week, Wednesday, September the 13th. The schools in Abaco, Eleuthero, the Berry Islands, North Andros, and Central Andros, sir, those on the mainland and the keys of those islands also suffered and sustained no major damage, and they were not prevented in opening or in resuming school activities for those students. In South Andros, schools have now been opened, sir, and as a result of Hurricane Irma, the issues that were caused by that storm have been addressed, continuing to be addressed, and the schools are now open and operational. I also wish to report, Mr. Speaker, that on the island of New Providence, no school here sustained major damage. All schools continue, so, however, to undergo what we call summer repairs, with the exception of the Stephen Dillett Primary School. All of the schools on New Providence are now open and operational. I'll come to Stephen Dillett in a moment. At the start of the school year, Mr. Speaker, a few schools were not yet ready because the repairs were not completed. Most notably, the preschool unit of the Early Childhood Center on East Street, the preschool unit at Claridge Primary, and the preschool unit at Cleveland Enos. I wish to report, Mr. Speaker, on Williamstown, Exuma, where before the hurricane, that school was undergoing roof work, and that roof work was made worse because of Hurricane Irma. However, those repairs have already been resumed, and the students in Williamstown is being bused to the school in Georgetown. A bus is already taking them there, sir, and those students, those extra numbers, are being accommodated. Mr. Speaker, there's a new school being built in Staniel Key, but presently it is not fully completed. And there's also a new teacher's cottage, which is not yet also completed. As a result, those students are being accommodated in a local church. The roof on the teacher's cottage, however, is taking a little bit longer than we had anticipated, but the work on that, sir, is progressing. Cat Island. Some teachers had been evacuated in Cat Island, Mr. Speaker. They have since returned, and the schools were opened last week, Wednesday, September 13th. In San Salvador, no major damages, sir, and the schools were opened there on time. The same can be said, sir, of Long Island. Again, no major damage as a result of Irma. The schools there opened and continued on time, except the one day that they were asked to stay indoors. Mr. Speaker, I want to just take a look for a moment, sir, at the Michael District and Ragged Island. I think it is now well known to this Honorable Assembly that the Duncan Town community was virtually decimated by Hurricane Irma. I think the newspaper reports indicated that that community was unlivable. The Ragged Island all-age school, sir, while not completely destroyed, will extract major repairs at that school, particularly the roofs on those three buildings. There are 6 students in Ragged Island at the school, the all-age school, and they were relocated to Nassau or Exuma, and they are presently being accommodated here in New Providence at the various schools, including Yellow Elder and others in that vicinity. Many of those Ragged Island residents, Mr. Speaker, had family members in this community, so their being accommodated was very easily, sir. The teacher's cottage, however, on Ragged Island has been completely destroyed. Unlike the school, that cottage is entirely gone. And the two teachers, a husband and wife, Mr. Budram and his wife, they have been reassigned to Exuma, where they are now continuing with their educational delivery. Continuing in Ackland's Crooked Island and Meguana, except for Ackland's, the schools in Crooked Island and Meguana fared fairly well, sir, in terms of damage, and they continue to operate at this time. However, the schools in Acklands are all closed because of damages that we have in those particular schools. Work is now underway with an attempt to get those schools back operational. And in particular, Mr. Speaker, the place in Salina Point, which was seriously damaged by Hurricane Irma. The residents who heeded the Prime Minister's call for evacuation, many of them are now from the Salina Point community, are now at the Kendall G.L. Isaacs. And I am advised, Mr. Speaker, that of those that are there, we have 59 students from the Salina Point Acklands community. Those 59 students are being accommodated, and I'll come to this in a minute, but they're being accommodated with the schools here in New Providence throughout the area around the Kendall G.L. Isaacs Gymnasium. I just want to say to you, Mr. Speaker, that Stephen Tillett, that school opened this morning. The reason for its opening had nothing to do, or late opening, had nothing to do with Hurricane Irma. The work that was undertaken was a most ambitious exercise. And as a consequence, it was promised by last week, September the 11th, a deadline which was not met. And as a result, Mr. Speaker, a decision was made after careful review with all of our executive team members at the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Works that there will still be some more work and time needed for that school to be completed. Therefore, those students are being placed in accommodated in three specific areas. The preschool grades 1 and 2, the preschool grades 1 and 2 are being accommodated at St. Barnabas Preschool. Grades 3 and 4 at Mabel Walker Primary School. Grades 5 and 6 at the Wesley Methodist Church Hall on Chapel Street. When we recognize this is not ideal, we are seeking to rapidly accommodate them in their newly renovated school. And Mr. Speaker, over the coming days, leaders within the Ministry of Education will come together to strategize and to review the current support, and where necessary to devise a plan for the continuity of education of students in islands severely impacted by Hurricane Irma. This plan will address and remedy the loss in instructional hours so that our students are not placed at a disadvantage. Our recent All Bahamas Merit Scholar, Paloma Cartwright from Long Island, developed such a plan in the aftermath of Hurricane Joaquin, which affected Long Island in 2015. And it was a plan, sir, that was fueled by the determination to succeed and not give up when faced with overwhelming chaos and difficulties. The reality is, sir, that we live, Mr. Speaker, in a hurricane zone, and we cannot allow this to be an excuse to put our education on hold until conditions get better. And I am not by any means, sir, minimizing the destabilization, the grief and loss associated with natural disasters. I also am realistic to know that no one factors this in when exam results or student performance are measured at the end of the school year. So we have to devise, Mr. Speaker, and review, strategize as to how we are going to make up for the crucial lost days. We are already very tight in our schedule in the Ministry of Education with only 180 instructional days in an academic year. So we are unable to afford a loss, Mr. Speaker, in any of them. We, of course, Mr. Speaker, expect that with the 62,000 plus students who have registered for the new school year in both the public and the private institutions, that we can look forward to a brighter future for our students this year. Thank you very much, and God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Order that the communication be brought up. Order that communication to lie on the table. Further statements and communications by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marathon.
Just suspend for the luncheon adjournment. Yourself?
Yes.
I so move.
Is this seconded? Second. It has been moved and seconded that the business of the House suspend until 3 p.m. today. Those who are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will rise. The business of the House remains suspended, stands suspended until 3 p.m. today.